All right, what happens the moment a Christian dies? Okay, this is a fun question, and let me tell you why it's a fun question. There are two basic views on that. One of them comes from the verse that says, it's appointed to a man once to die and then to be judged. And so you go, boom, boom, death, and then judgment takes place. The other one comes from the idea that there is a judgment that is to come, but it's somewhere in the future that corresponds with Jesus' return. That the dead in Christ will rise to meet Jesus in the air, and then the judgment happens after that. So if that time is going to be somewhere in the future, say 50 years or 500 years, it doesn't matter. What happens in the in-between time from when we die and when Jesus comes again, we meet him in the air, and then we're going to the final judgment. And people have done all kinds of things to be able to try and figure out which one of those works. Christians debate with one another. Is there some kind of there's like very advanced teaching on soul sleep that happens in between the time of death and the time that Jesus comes back again. And just so you know, this is not something that the church or our denomination takes an official stand on. So you're hearing the Mark Ashton opinion from this point forward. Truth is, in evangelical world, people have all kinds of different options that they take a look at. But here's the way that I resolve it. I think our problem is not a biblical problem. It's not a philosophical problem. I think our problem is a problem with time, the way that we think about time. And here's the truth. Time works different for God than it works for us. Since God is the origin of all things, and he created time, so you go back to the first words of Genesis, in the beginning. Well, God obviously existed prior to in the beginning, and he exists outside of in the beginning. So God is transcendent over time. Further, Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. And you guys know that Abraham existed 2,000 years before Jesus. So Jesus says that he is self-existent beyond the span of time. Time works different for God than it works for us. So I believe that at the moment of death, you are translated out of the earth time frame into the eternal time frame, which is essentially timelessness with God. So it is true that it is appointed man once to die and then to be judged. It's also true that time on planet Earth continues to march on while other things are going on here on planet Earth. Other people die, and when they die, they are immediately judged. And it's also true that all that judgment happens at the same time in God's timelessness framework. So because time works differently for God than it works for us, I'm convinced that instantly we die, we're translated into heaven, and we're judged simultaneously with all of the other people who died at all of the other different times.